Hello and welcome to the 2024 boat race on a glorious spring afternoon in London for one of the world's oldest and most famous amateur sporting events. 8 athletes from Oxford University, 8 athletes from Cambridge University, 2 boats, nearly 200 years of rivalry. The first men's cruise raced on the Thames in 1829, while the first women's race took place in 1927. All those competing today are students at the 2 most prestigious universities in the country. The boat race has become a fixture in the British springtime sporting calendar, with hundreds of thousands of people lining the banks of the Thames to watch the action each year, whether or not they have an affiliation with either university. It's a spectacle and a rivalry that captures the imagination, thanks to the history of the race, the dedication and the effort of the athletes and the course itself. Putney to Mortlake, known as the Tideway, a 4.25 mile stretch of the Thames in southwest London that's been a battleground for these 2 boats for nearly 2 centuries. Andrew Cotter can talk us through it.
It is just over 4 miles of the twisting Thames between Putney and Mortlake, racing upstream, but with the flow of the incoming tide. The crews choose either the south bank, the Surrey station, or the north, which is Middlesex. The initial slight advantage is to Middlesex around Fulham's Craven Cottage. After 3.5 to 4 minutes, the mile marker is reached and the landmark of the former Harrods Furniture Depository before Hammersmith Bridge. The majority of crews leading here go on to win, and now the bend favours the Surrey side. A large sweeping turn past halfway into the Strait of Chiswick Reach and past the island Chiswick 8. Quite often into a headwind, this can be exposed and rougher water. A final slight bend to Surrey, and then it turns back to favour the north bank, under Barnes Bridge, into the final 1,000 metres and towards the finish just before Chiswick Bridge.
Well, an absolutely beautiful day on the banks of the Thames, and the first to take on the famous course are the women's crews. Since the first race in 1927, Cambridge have won 46 times, Oxford 30. Cambridge have dominated in recent years, winning the last 6 in a row. You have to go back to 2016 for the last Oxford victory, when the Cambridge boat nearly sank. However, form in fixtures and experience in the Oxford crew suggests they're stronger than ever. This year, there are 6 returning Blues from last year in the boat. Annie Azanakis is one of those who's been here before. She was the stroke in the losing Oxford boat in 2022, and she's back on the Tideway today, determined to avenge that loss this year.
After the 2022 boat race, I kind of knew it would be my last season of rowing. To have been a part of that race was a really big achievement for me, regardless of the result. I was back home in Melbourne for a year. Then whilst I was home, I applied to Oxford again for medicine. Honestly, a little bit on a whim. I wasn't really expecting to get in again, but then it all kind of unfolded perfectly and I found myself back here again. I'm in the graduate entry medicine course, which I'll come out as a doctor in the end, which is very exciting. So lots of lectures on the clinical sciences, and then we also get 1 day a week of clinical placement. So it's really cool to be in class and learning about, the respiratory system, and then you go into the hospital the next day and you meet someone with COPD and you kind of understand their experience of having that disease.
Otherwise I wouldn't be. But it finishes.
I got so much food. Everyone would ask me, oh, you're going back to Oxford, so you're going to row again? And I very quickly shut down any suggestions of it because I was very much retired, very much enjoying my yoga and Pilates and just going for walks. But I was like, no, I missed out on so much Oxford life and being a student and doing the fun stuff.
Dinner time!
Going to, I don't know, bops, as they call them, big organised parties. Never been to one. Don't know what it's like, honestly. But then I had a week here without rowing, and I realised very quickly that nothing meant as much to me as rowing did. As soon as the thought of going back to training and the thought of having that schedule and balance of rowing in school started itching at me, I guess I couldn't really avoid it. Wake up around 5:45, off to Ifley Gym for a usually erg or weight session. And then off to class. It's a pretty rapid bolt to get to the medical teaching centre. It's breakfast on the go, coffee on the go, class all day long, and then back to the gym, either for erg weights or off to Wallingford for a row. It was hard. I was coming with basically no fitness base, but I also had some belief in my muscle memory that I'd be able to get on a boat and kind of do what I do well on the boat again. And it definitely took a while to draw up, like bring the fitness up and also tie that into how I move the boat. Like you put your mind to a goal you just want to achieve, and I think that's kind of an inherent thing to most athletes. But another thing that kind of kept me going this season is just realising what an insane opportunity it is. I think coming back to Oxford without an intention to row, but now being faced with this opportunity again, which I didn't think I was going to have, it just kind of makes you really grateful and appreciative just to be on the team and to have another crack at it.
Annie Azanakis back for another crack at winning the boat race with Oxford, and there she is leading the crew out. These are pictures from about half an hour ago on the banks of the Thames at Putney. Oxford with a vastly experienced 6 returning Blues, 2 newcomers, but both of those with World Championship medals at under 23 level. Annie Sharp and Lucy Edmonds bringing top level race experience to the boat. The crew then: Annie Azanakis in stroke, Julia Lindsay, Annie Sharp, Sarah Marshall, Claire Aitken, Tessa Haining, Ellie Sadler and Lucy Edmonds in the bow seat. They'll be coxed by the hugely experienced Jo Gellert, who coxed stern pair Annie Azanakis and Julia Lindsay in the losing 2020 Oxford boat, while Cambridge will be coxed by American Hannah Murphy. The Cambridge women's crew, though, who'll be coming out onto the water shortly, have dominated the race over recent years. They're looking for a 7th win in a row. There are 2 returning rowers in the crew from last year, Karina Graf and Cambridge president Jenna Armstrong. Iris Powell and Caris Earle, though, were both part of the reserve crew last year that completed an unprecedented clean sweep of victories over Oxford in all races. And now they are ready to step up into Cambridge's blue boat.
So I'm studying medicine here at Key's College. This year I'm integrating in physiology.
I'm a 4th year studying natural sciences, and I'm studying earth sciences this year, which I really enjoy.
So I originally, I guess, came from the dark side growing up in Oxford. My parents both went to Oxford, and so growing up I sort of used to be around all these Oxford students running around in their gowns, and I always thought, oh, that'd be really cool to do. I moved to Cambridge, and as soon as I came here, and especially starting rowing, it's such a big rivalry, I was like, yeah, fully come to the light side now.
Cambridge was actually never really on my radar. I applied on a bit of a whim. It seemed like a bit of a pipe dream, a bit of a long shot. Kind of crazy that I've ended up here.
At school I did like loads of different sports. My main one before coming to uni was probably rugby. But then during COVID, I did a lot of running around the parks in Oxford, and some of them go down by the rivers where some of the college crews were rowing. I was always like, oh, one day if I get to uni, I'd like to give that a go.
I've always been sporty, but in 2020, when I was 18, I came to terms with the fact that I had relative energy deficiency in sport, or REDS. I'd completely lost my menstrual cycle, and I had a lot of side effects and stuff from that. There were wider implications, kind of cardiac implications. I wasn't aware that was something that I needed to actually focus on and fix. Coming to rowing after that has given me like a way bigger appreciation for my body, and I honestly think it's made me like a way better athlete than I would have been if I hadn't gone through it.
Hello.
Hey, how's your session been?
Oh, it was wonderful, thank you. Before trialing, I was sort of expecting it to be a very sort of competitive, cutthroat environment, but it's not like that at all. Like, everyone's supporting each other, and it's much more about pushing yourself forward while bringing everyone with you.
This angle's so funny.
You can't ignore sort of the grandeur of the event. It's just an incredible experience to be a part of, and it's the kind of thing that once you've done it, like, can't be taken away from you.
It's a really nice mentality that no matter if you're new, you come straight from college, or you've been rowing in the Olympics, like, everyone's driving towards the same goal, and we're all working together to get there. Having the group of people who've all sort of come through that journey together is really nice.
this is probably going to be the most intense period of my life, hopefully ever. But you get so much out of it on a personal level as well, so yeah.
I listened to the reception for the Cambridge 8 coming out of the boathouse on the banks of the Thames at Putney. Again, pictures from about half an hour ago as the crew carry the boat down to the water. The preparation done then for Iris Powell and Caris Earl and the rest of the Cambridge 8. Megan Lee in the stroke seat, Claire Hole in 7, Caris Earl in 6, Karina Graf in the 5 seat. President Jenna Armstrong, 30 years old, the oldest athlete out on the river today, in number 4. Iris Powell, number 3. 2-seat Joanna Matthews, and in the bow, Gemma King from St John's College. Oxford, as I mentioned, with a more experienced boat, but Cambridge only 2 returning blues for them, but 5 members of the victorious 2023 Blondie crew, that's the reserve boats that also race on boat race day, making the step up to the blue boat today. Only American stroke Megan Lee has international experience in the Cambridge boat, winning a gold medal in the USA Women's 8 at the 2023 Under-23 World Championships. So, on paper, Oxford the favourites to win the women's boat race, but as we all know, the boat race is not won on paper. So these are the scenes as we prepare for the women's race in 2024, and hardly a seat to be had on the banks of the Thames. 250,000 spectators thronging along the towpaths on either side of the river in glorious sunshine, and the tide coming in. The crews race on the incoming tide, and coxing will be crucial, finding the fastest water, but with so much rainfall and water running off the land, the strength of the tide will feel weakened to these boats. There they are, the Oxford crew on the right-hand side, and the Cambridge crew on the left. It looks like we are not far away from the go for the women's boat race in 2024. Just imagine what's going through the minds and the bodies of these athletes. 7 months of preparation, and ahead of them 20 minutes or so of sheer effort and grit and determination. That's the view from Putney Bridge, the historic start of the boat race. They will race up towards Hammersmith Bridge, past Craven Cottage, the home of Fulham Football Club on the right-hand side, and then on towards Barnes Bridge and Chiswick Bridge. Annie Azanakis in the stroke seat for Oxford there. A picture of focus as we get set for the 78th women's boat race on the Thames in London on what is an absolutely stunning spring day. That's Craven Cottage there on the left-hand side. A new stand for Fulham Football Club. And the scene is set then. The 78th women's boat race. Time to join your commentary team for this year's women's race. Olympic silver medalist cox Zoe de Toledo. 2-time winning cox for Cambridge, Matthew Holland. And both of those two alongside Andrew Cotter.
Well, the weather today, a glorious aberration, a rare parting of the clouds after a winter and spring so far of seemingly endless rain. I mean, this is where it must all seem worth it, though, for those watching, but most of all for those who sit in the 2 boats so close to Putney Bridge, and for the 2 coxies who get ready. Hand up for Joe Gillette in the Oxford boat as we just give you a run through the names. You've seen a few of them already in the bow seat. Gemma King, Joanna Matthews, Iris Powell, Jen Armstrong, Karina Graf, Caris Earl, Claire Hole, Megan Lee and Hannah Murphy, the American cox for Cambridge. And as we look down on the 2 boats, Lucy Edmonds, Ella Stadler, the president, Tessa Haining, Claire Aitken, Sarah Marshall. I think they're just about ready to go here.
Annie Sharp, Julia Lindsay, Annie Anazakis and Joe Gillette is the Cox for Oxford. You see, just looking down from on high, that there isn't that much of a tide with them.
Go!
But Richard Phelps, the umpire, gets them going here in the 78th Women's Boat Race. And since 2015, they have been racing here in the Tideway in this very famous stretch of the Thames on the same day as the men, who will go in an hour's time. But this is about the start of the women's boat race, and what a start has been made by Oxford. They practice these starts over and over again, and certainly the very start of the race has been bossed by Oxford.
I think flying start is an understatement here. That is absolutely terrific lead for the first 20 strokes. You can just see from the outside how directly the blades in the Oxford boat and in the Cambridge boat are going into the water. They're wasting no time when they're at the front end of the stroke. They're just putting the blades in, and that gives them a really aggressive rhythm that they can start driving onto their race rhythm for.
So Oxford here on the Middlesex station, so Oxford in the yellow boat that we can see at the top of the picture. They have chosen that station, interestingly, unlike previous years, and I think it might be because they wanted to use this quick start and get ahead.
Well, there's the umpire's view, or near enough the umpire's view, and the crews both apart at the moment, and the umpires just want to avoid clashing of blades. We saw, you know, a couple of the warm-up races as well in different conditions, choppier conditions in the men's and women's warm-up races. We did see clashing of blades. We saw some pretty aggressive racing, and just starting to creep together a little bit more now, and you'll see Craven Cottage start to come into view there. Now the quicker water should be a little bit further out into the river, and Oxford just moving towards Cambridge just now.
Interestingly, it looks like Cambridge are now starting to come back at Oxford. There are two strategies you can take off the start. One is to keep the rate really high for a very long time and try and get a big lead and then relax into your race rhythm, which is what it looks like Oxford has been trying to do. Cambridge looks like they've settled into their longer, smoother, slightly lower rate rhythm early on, and just get that settled and truck along, try and sock it to Oxford over this whole course rather than get in front.
So we're not going to see a repeat of a move by Jasper Parish last year in the men's race, or Hannah Murphy did it in one of the warm-up races. I think it was against Thames, that you would go for closer to the Fulham Flats, closer to Craven Cottage, to sort of cut the corner and hope that that slack water wasn't quite so slack, or that it would provide you some protection. In these conditions, both are staying out in the deeper water.
Yeah, there was a suspicion that some of the crews might try to do that because of how much flood water has been coming down, so sort of negating some of the traditional stream. I think they've gone a little bit closer to the side than we'd normally see. But Oxford here are really using that early advantage, and that looks like half a length to me now.
Yeah, I think so, and the Oxford rhythm is starting to settle, and it's looking really, really strong. I'm really impressed at how Cambridge have managed to stick in there around the outside of the bend. The first bend is worth about a third of a length to the Middlesex station. That's the station on the left of your screen as you see it now. And so you've got to work really hard if you're on Surrey to make sure that that Oxford crew doesn't get away too soon, because as soon as you lose contact, it's really very quiet and it's very hard to form a race.
Just a reminder of recent races, and last year Cambridge made it 6 in a row in the women's boat race, so Oxford are trying to end that stretch of domination by the light blues and so far the dark blues on the placid waters of the Thames today, on this glorious spring day, have made the brighter start.
So this is a crucial moment in the race now, where Oxford on the right-hand side of your screen are about to break clear water. And in the bows of the Cambridge crew, Gemma King and Joe Matthews, they've got to be constantly shouting back to the stern of the boat in Cambridge. That's the bit closest to the Cox, saying actually they're still there, they're not going anywhere. Because as soon as you lose overlap, it gets very, very quiet in the stern of the boat.
Yeah, and last year Cambridge pushed on at Craven Cottage and took Oxford's water. They could then choose that water, and Tara Slade, the Oxford Cox, asked for a big push to try and effectively bump Cambridge, which would have meant a Cambridge disqualification. We're certainly not at that stage yet, but Oxford are in charge here.
You saw Joe Gillette, who we can see on screen there, the coxswain of the Oxford crew. He looked over at Cambridge's bow, he glanced at it, he knows exactly where they are. He knows that this is a race-deciding moment, because this is a time where you can actually break that string of contact and really make things difficult for the crew that is chasing.
There's Hannah Murphy, the Cambridge Cox, and you hear the instructions that they're shouting all the time. They're just trying to, they're little pushes within races, aren't they? Say, right, big 20 strokes here, a big 40 seconds, big minute here.
And I think if you're Cambridge at this point, you've got to be aware of the fact that you are about to gain your advantage. So the bend's going to go in your favour, as we can see here on the screen. That bend round the left is going to be in Cambridge's favour. So they need to hold on until it's their turn to go.
Great views from on high from the helicopter as we pass Barnes Wetlands, the sights and the landmarks of the boat race which have become so familiar to so many. Hammersmith Bridge at the top of your picture will come into view shortly. There we are, the green spires of Joseph Bazalgette's bridge, which is still undergoing a little bit of work to get it fit for traffic again. The gap, it's just creeping out. I mean, for Cambridge here, it's just about keeping in touch until the big Surrey bend starts to play in their favour.
Yeah, absolutely, although the bend is in your favour, but you have to be in it to win it, and if there's no contact, then the bend doesn't make much difference. I actually think Cambridge Cox Hannah Murphy has done a terrific job here to just keep the crew contact. The gap, the margin for Oxford hasn't really increased, and now they're coming to their bend, so if she's clever, she'll talk them through this bend in 1 minute chunks. So 1 minute chunk is a manageable chunk, and give each of her crews a key focus for that each 1 minute, so that they can focus on clawing back Oxford's lead.
You can just see the contact between the two boats, just that fraction of an overlap, a little bit deceptive on that angle. But again, a reminder of where we are, passing the old Harrods Furniture Depository. That's about a third of the way through this 6.8 kilometre or 4.25 mile course, and there's almost clear water, but Cambridge are just clinging on because, as Matthew has said, Cambridge will have the big Surrey bend in their favour, but if Oxford could break clear, they could take that water.
So just before, we saw Oxford starting to sneak over into Cambridge's water, but they were very quickly warned back by the umpire, and they had to just take that chance and move back over onto their station. But I suspect Joe will be just starting to squeeze in.
If I were Cox Joe Gillette right now, what I'd do is I'd say to my crew, look, I think we're moving faster. I'm happy with our rhythm. I'm not going to take any chances with the umpire. I'm going to give you space to just focus on your rhythm. We'll stay away from Cambridge. You focus on your rhythm. I'm not going to get your blades close. I'm not going to risk this race-setting rhythm here.
That gap is holding, if anything, in fact, closing. Again, that angle's fractionally deceptive, but in the bow seat for Cambridge, Gemma King, she will just about have peripheral vision of Joe Gillette. A warning from Richard Phelps. He's warning Cambridge to get over to the Surrey side as they creep out just a fraction.
In the stern of the Cambridge boat, that's the bit closest to the Cox, which isn't alongside Oxford, hearing those warnings from the umpire will be really motivational, because as far as you're concerned, you can't see Oxford. You're having to rely on trust that they're still there. And so the fact that the umpire's warning you means you're close enough that your steering might cause a problem. So that's incredibly motivational in the Cambridge boat. And you can see that now they're back up to half a length deficit, which is a fantastic position to be in. They're crawling it back.
And so the flotilla churning up the waters behind of all those following the race. And that gap has closed, and there is a little bit of overlap as they go under. The one lamppost is the perfect line under Hammersmith Bridge. And now Cambridge are coming back into this.
They're sneaking up on Oxford slowly, but I think if you're in that Oxford boat, you have to have the confidence, the arrogance, actually, to sit there and think, OK, it's all right. This is their bend. It doesn't matter, actually, if they come back a little bit. We can continue to control the race.
I absolutely agree. And actually, you'll be able to see in a second the sheer determination on the faces of Oxford 7-seat Julia Lindsay and Stroke seat Anya Zarkas. They've both lost this race before together, and they're not going to want to let it go this time round.
Well, let's get our man on the river to give us his thoughts. Jasper Parish, we've heard from already in the programme. But Jasper, what are you seeing out there in this race so far? He's seeing many things. He's just not able to tell us about them. But what we can see here is the rhythm of the Cambridge. And again, the warning from Richard Phelps just lowers that white flag. Perhaps decided against the warning there as the boats come apart. But again, Cambridge are continuing to put this push on because they have that big... It's a huge looping Surrey bend, and it's in their favour for a good part of this race to come.
And this kind of race now really becomes a war of attrition. This is going to be a slow race this year because of all that floodwater coming down. There's not a huge amount of wind, and these crews really have to grit their teeth. They're going to feel that lactate burning in their muscles, and they have to be prepared just to keep their hand in the fire. Look at this now, almost dead level.
I can't believe what I'm seeing. Oxford went into this as strong favourites, and I thought at the start when Oxford got that lead, this was the race done and dusted, but Cambridge have put in an absolutely extraordinary effort. This is phenomenally good quality rowing. This is one of the races for the ages already.
Just watching the warm-up races, and Cambridge finished so strongly against Thames, it was. Likewise, Oxford did against Oxford Brookes as well. So we know they both have staying power and stamina, and it's such a long course. When you think about championship rowing being 2,000 metres on a controlled, calm lake more often than not, and here is such a test of the coxing abilities as well. But Cambridge are starting to turn this around.
I think the thing that's different as well with the international racing is that there's no previous form for these crews. They have never raced each other, so you don't actually get the measure of your opposition until the umpire's flag drops. And then you've just got to, you know, you've got to play the ball where it lies. You've just got to take what happens, what comes to you during the race.
Well, we haven't had a close race in the women's race since they came to the Tideway in 2015. The closest was 2 1/4 lengths. Cambridge won by a couple of years ago. There was a slightly closer race at Ely the year before that, but that was over that straight course of about 5,000 metres or so. On the Tideway, on the championship course, there hasn't been a really great race between these two universities. We might get it for the first time this year, but this will be demoralising for Oxford. They had a commanding position, and now as the waters start to come to life, as they head into a little bit of a breeze and the surface picks up, it's difficult for both crews, but Cambridge are starting to move further away.
Absolutely, and in the Oxford crew you've got 6 returning blues, but they're all losing returning blues, and what you've got to be careful of is you don't want to get into your head, oh, hang on a second, this is happening again. They need to make sure that they stay positive, they keep their trust in their rhythm. Julia Lindsay and Annie Anatzakis in the stern pair are doing a terrific job, and they've just got to stay confident and trust that they're going to hold on to Cambridge around this last part of the Cambridge bend to Surrey on the left of the screen, and then in the last third of the race, the bend goes back in their favour. So if they can hold contact, they'll be able to sneak it back round again and get that.
Well, let's see if we can hear from Jasper Parish, winning Cox last year in the men's race. And this is where they move across Chiswick Reach, and the line goes over to that north bank of the river. Jasper, how are you seeing it so far? What a comeback by Cambridge.
Yeah, what a move by Cambridge here. I'm very impressed by the coxing of Hannah. She's making a big move here. Oh my goodness, we should see something really exciting here. Oh, we're going to see a bump here. Oxford are going for the bump. They've touched. That's contact. Umpire Richard Phelps is just shouting at Oxford right now.
Just to explain here, Oxford trying to bump Cambridge, saying that Cambridge are in their water. If they bumped them, it could have been a disqualification. I mean, that is as dramatic as it gets.
That is a frankly absurd decision on the water from both Coxes there. I don't understand why, given that the race was actually going very well for Cambridge, you'd have steered in front. Then I don't understand why in Oxford, Joe Gillette chose to steer for them. This notion of going for the bump only works if you're on your water. As soon as you start moving in to steer for it, it goes out of the window. That was a silly decision to make, and I think it has cost them a lot of water.
Well,
look at that.
You can see now the difference between the two, and this may well have been the pivotal point of the race, as Oxford tried to bump, use that terminology well known in rowing, but if Cambridge were in Oxford's water and Oxford had bumped them as they did, then that would be technically a disqualification for Cambridge. That's what I think Oxford were looking for, but I think it's cost them.
You saw umpire Richard Phelps there chatting with his assistant umpire Caroline Litton, so I wonder whether there's going to be a decision to make for the umpire. In my head, I think both crews acted in a manner that wasn't necessary, and I think they were both at fault for that, and it looks like Oxford has come off significantly worse.
Zoe.
The thing that was interesting there was actually, okay, the Cox's decisions aside, was watching the rowers. So Cambridge managed to stay in their rhythm really nicely, but I think it disrupted the rhythm a lot more in the Oxford boat. You saw their blades went as sharp into the water. They looked like they were being sort of bothered by what was coming back, the dirty water, as we say, from Cambridge, and that definitely threw them off.
We speak about wanting to steer as little as possible as a Cox, because every time you put the rudder on, it's like a sort of small credit card under the water. Then that upsets the flow of the boat. You can feel it. And so any sudden changes on the rudder result in very significant disruption to the rhythm. And I think actually if you're steering in to try and hit another crew, you are going to disrupt the rhythm.
Well, such a close race, and now such a big lead for Cambridge, for Hannah Murphy, the Cox. And Jasper Parish, we went to you just at the right moment there. What was your reading of what happened there and what might unfold in any decision after this race?
Yeah, it looked to me like Hannah made a good move to sort of send some puddles down towards the Oxford crew, and then as they came over, they got a warning from the umpire, Richard Phelps, and then they sort of drifted back over to their station. Meanwhile, Joe Gillette and the Oxford crew, I think he thought he had a good go at a bump while they were being warned, but maybe just left it slightly too late. Quite a big rudder movement, went for this bump. I'd say they probably just did it maybe 3 or 4 strokes too late, and by that point, you know, I think it might cost them this race. This is certainly a bigger margin than we'd expect to see at this point in the race, and certainly a bigger margin to Cambridge than we thought, given Oxford were the favourites here.
Yes, the houses of Barnes start to come into view, and then Barnes Bridge, and beyond that the stretch to Mortlake and Chiswick Bridge in the finish line. But really, Cambridge are away and clear now, and they are, barring a miracle and misfortune, they are going to win this now. So Oxford, Joe Gillette just has to try and convince his crew that they're still within touch and urge them on to greater endeavour. But really, this is beyond Oxford. Now, the interesting thing is that this water really is flat now, so I wonder if both crews, you have to shoot the central span of Barnes Bridge, but I wonder how close they might be getting to that right-hand bank now, the north bank, and as they go round and under Barnes Bridge, I'm not sure there's anything that can save Oxford now.
No, I think that might be the case, although anything can happen in the boat race and you never know what lurks round the corner. But I think the strategies are either you can cut the corners if there's very little stream, which we're seeing here, and then you take the shortest route akin to what a Formula 1 boat would do, or you just stay where you are and try and disrupt the rhythm as little as possible. And if I were Cambridge, that's what I'd do. You have to go through that middle arch of Barnes Bridge. That's encoded in the rules. But so there's no point in cutting the corner now, only to come back out. What they might do after Barnes Bridge is try and take a Formula 1 corner here and just do a straight line straight to the finish.
Sounds like you might like Formula 1, Matthew.
Well, I know Lee Mackenzie's waiting at the finish, so I've got to give her something to talk about.
Now, there's the example of the dirty water being sent down, the puddles come down, and that just offers a little bit less stability in the water. It's not for the oars to grab onto it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what will happen is the water will be bumpier, basically, for the Oxford crew. They'll be feeling that disruption that Cambridge have caused. And that's kind of a curse sometimes, but also it does allow you to feel when you're coming back to a crew. So if you're getting back into the race, if you're starting to chase, you're getting on their tail, you can start to feel, especially up in the bow seats, you feel that little bit more disruption, and you're kind of thinking, okay, actually, this is it, we're on there.
I think one of the things, let's talk about this Cambridge crew for a second. One of the things that's quite significant is that 7 of these rowers have rowed under Cambridge coach Patrick Ryan's programme for several years. There are 2 returning blues, but 6 returning from the Blondie crew, and that means that pattern of movement is firmly ingrained in their minds and in their bodies. You can see that they're rowing really confidently. They've got such a nice flow to it. When you're looking at a crew's rhythm, you look that the gap between their heads stays the same through all parts of the stroke, and this is really lovely in the Cambridge crew here.
I think it's important to mention Paddy. You know, he's always said that no matter the trend of the last few years, no matter the success they've had in previous years, every single season starts afresh. And that man, he is a feminist. He believes it's his responsibility to be an ally to his athletes, to champion that equality and really empower his squad. And I think we're seeing that here.
Well, Mallard scatters under the serene progress of the Cambridge crew, and sparkling waters will carry them to the finish here, because they'll be looking, everyone in that Cambridge boat, they know, in contrast to the Oxford crew who have to try and believe or be lied to that they're still within touch. Cambridge know how far clear they are, and it's just that one final bend to negotiate round towards Chiswick Bridge and the finish line just before that, and the cheers really now are all for Cambridge, and they're heading for a 7th victory.
Absolutely, but I think in the Oxford crew as well, a large part of it is rowing with absolute pride to be wearing the colour of your university. To get the opportunity to compete for your university is an enormous honour denied to so many, and so it's such a proud moment that you give your absolute utmost no matter where you are on the course.
That's why I've never quite believed those who row in the boat race, the men's or the women's boat race, because they say winning is everything, losing they want to forget about it. But really, to make the crew, to make the blue boat is a great achievement in itself. It won't be much consolation to Oxford here, to Lucy Edmonds, Ella Stadler, the president, Tess Henning, the American, Claire Aitken, Sarah Marshall, Annie Sharp in the 6th seat there, Julia Lindsay, Annie Anazaka, so Joe Gillette. They're still giving everything they have, but they're heading for defeat again.
I think you're right there, Andrew, and also, one thing that's taken me a couple of years of perspective to realise is that actually, when you're competing, it is winning is everything. But the lessons you learn from taking part in a boat race are enormous, and it's something that sticks with you in life. The friendship, the determination, the idea of training together as a team for a collective goal are lessons that all of these women and Jo Gillette will never, ever lose. That's something that will be with them for the rest of their lives. And their loss in the Oxford boat will sting for sure, but this is something that they will look back on with pride for many years.
And it's going to be a big loss, a big margin as well for Oxford as we sail forward through the skies to Cambridge. We're a long way clear indeed.
Interestingly, you are seeing now both of those crews are cutting that corner. They're going for that direct route to the finish. I think they both believe that the land water coming down is so strong, the river flow is so minimal, that it's worth cutting that bend.
It will be fractionally stronger for the men's race in just under an hour's time, but here for Cambridge, look at it again through the placid waters towards the finish line here. So we listed the Oxford crew in order, and we'll do so again for Cambridge here. 5 Britons, 3 Americans, 1 German. Gemma King in the bow seat, Joe Matthews, Iris Powell, Jenna Armstrong, the president, Karina Graf, the German, Carousel, Claire Hall, and Megan Lee in the stroke seat, and then Hannah Murphy, the cox. And they are that close to the finish line, which you can see the finish line just marked on the right-hand side there, just before Chiswick Bridge. And the thousands who have come out to watch on this glorious day, watching another Cambridge victory. Oxford came here to try and turn the tide, but it has not turned yet. They are the only crew in shot and sailing serenely towards victory again. They will make it 7 in a row in the women's boat race. Cambridge will breach the line. They'll have the victory. We will talk about the incident in the middle of the race, but the second half belongs to Cambridge. The title belongs to Cambridge again.
That was an amazing performance from Cambridge. I think it's fair to say many of us here expected this to be a significant Oxford victory. And I think the tenacity shown in that Cambridge crew, especially when they were down, to just trust in their rhythm, to believe that they've got this, was extraordinary.
You can see what that's taken out of that Oxford crew there at the end, barely able to use their legs to row, and straight away the hand was up from Jo Gillette. He is going to, of course, he's going to put in a complaint about that move.
And that's why the red flag is hoisted at the moment, so subject to ratification. But the pain and the suffering is eased when you have won, or think you have won. Let's see if we can listen into the debate, because Jo Gillette has his hand up, but Richard Phelps just chatting now.
That's where the bump, that's what I saw, the bump took place on Cambridge's water.
Can't quite pick up what they're saying.
I think what umpire Richard Phelps is saying is that he feels that Oxford steered to try for the bump and actually ended up in Cambridge's water. You can see here discussing, on the right-hand side of your screen is Boris Rankov, the chair of the umpires panel. In the middle is Richard Phelps, the umpire for the race, and Caroline Liston on the left is the assistant.
You saw the same as me?
It sounds to me like, I don't know what you think, Zoe, it sounds to me like Richard is going to disallow Oxford's protest. It's worth pointing out that when the umpire raises the red flag, that doesn't mean someone is going to be disqualified. That just means hold the result. He's going to go and have a conversation with the crews. But my gut feeling is Cambridge's victory will stand.
How did it affect the outcome of the race?
Okay, Richard, can we go to...
Take his launch over.
I'm coming to you.
Just waiting for his official decision here, an announcement and explanation. They think they have won, and I think they have as well. And I think that will stand, but we will see.
Joe, talk to me. Your hand is up. Yes. What's the appeal?
When they were in our water, we hit them.
Okay, if you remember the briefing, I said that if you come out of your station and bump the crew whilst they're in their station, that's not a foul by the leading crew.
I didn't come out of my station. I didn't touch my rudder when we went flat. We just went forwards. You had warned them. You'd warned them. They were in our water. I didn't touch my rudder. We went and hit them. I was still in my station.
My view...
Once we hit them, that you then started warning me.
Joe...
I was still in my water when they were...
Joe, my view is that you were out of your water when you had contact. My view is you deliberately steered towards their station in order to make that contact, and you steered deliberately out of your station into their station, and that contact took place on the Middlesex, on the Surrey side of the racing line. That's my view.
Okay, but I didn't. They were so far in front that I didn't have a need to swing round towards them. We just kept going forwards in our water.
Joe.
And it's only once we started making contact. It's only once we started making contact that you then started warning me. And I hadn't changed anything between
Joe,
what
I was warning you several times, and I had to use the language, Oxford, I'm warning you several times for you to come off your trajectory.
But that was after we'd hit them. Because when we hit them, that side was the one. That's when we swung towards them. And then after we hit them, we were then dragged over that way a bit, so we're out of our water. And that is why you then had to warn us, because of the way the clash left. And it hit them, it dragged us towards them a bit.
Joe, that's not how I saw it. I'm telling you, Joe, the way I saw it was that Cambridge were on their station. I warned them back on their station, and you came off your station in order to bump them.
They were still moving out towards us when we hit them.
Joe, that's, I'm afraid,
how can that be
that's...
them moving back to their station? If they were still moving out towards in front of us, and you've been warning them, so before the clash, you were warning them. They were staying that same trajectory, moving out more in front of us. We hit them. They had to move off. So
I think we're going to agree to disagree in this, says Richard Phelps, with Annie Anazakis having her say.
Okay,
Let's see if we can watch a replay of it as well.
First of all, can you... I'm going to just stay there, okay?
Right, while he continues to ruminate on such matters, let's have another look at it.
So Richard Phelps is obviously not sure, because he could have just said, look, that's it, that's done and dusted, that's my decision. But he's still thinking about it. And from this angle, I think, you know, well, he's warning Cambridge right now. Cambridge are moving in.
Oxford, hold your station! Cambridge, move! Oxford, hold your station!
Yeah.
I agree with him entirely. I'm afraid this was a touch of the rudder. Look at the way the bow board's pointing in the Oxford boat. It's swinging across the river. There has been rudder there.
I mean, just watching that replay initially, yes, initially he was warning Cambridge, but then there's almost a massive swing of the bow from Oxford. So
I'm afraid I think that the decision should be that the race result should stand. You can hear the desperation in Coach Cox, Joe Gillette's voice, an incredibly experienced Cox, and this is awful for him, but I'm afraid I don't agree with his appeal. I think he did touch the rudder there, and the result should stand.
And here we are.
Oxford, thank you for a very good race.
Thank you.
And umpire Richard Phelps raises the white flag, signifying the result of the race will stand, and Cambridge have won the women's boat race.
So there we are, confirmation, ratification. Cambridge women have it for a 7th successive race.
Heads up, really try what we just did.
And again, watching the replay again, you can entirely understand why that decision was made by Richard Phelps. But you understand why Joe Gillette has to try. But when watching the replay, you can see the two movements, the consequent movements of the boat. Initially from Cambridge coming across a little bit, but then it's almost the thought process you could see of Joe Gillette thinking, if I get across to them, not just in reaching them, but perhaps going into them.
I think it really could have gone either way, to be honest with you. It's just such a shame for Alan French for his first race there, leading the Oxford women, for a race to end in that way.
Well, there we are. Will there be such drama to come in the men's race shortly? But in the women's race, it's Cambridge again.
Well, what an extraordinary women's boat race for 2024. Huge controversy at the end of the race there, and I'm sure that's not the last we're going to hear about that incident between the Oxford boat coming into the water of the Cambridge boat. Definite contact there we saw on the replay between the Oxford boat and the Cambridge boat out in front. And Joe Gillette, you've got to wonder how he will come to regret his decision in the race. But absolute jubilation for the Cambridge crew. There's Megan Lee in the stroke seat, Claire Hole, number 7, Caris Earle, Karina Graf, Jenna Armstrong, the president, can celebrate once again. Iris Powell, Joanna Matthews, and Gemma King in the bow seat, who had the privilege, as all bow seat athletes do, of crossing the line first at Chiswick Bridge. So it is a seventh win in a row, I should say, for Cambridge in the women's boat race. Oxford, the favourites on paper coming into the race with a greater experience and better results in the early season fixtures. But it's Cambridge who prevail once again. And look at the devastation in the Oxford boat. 7 months of effort and hard work. Annie Azanakis and Julia Lindsay, part of the losing crew last year. And back-to-back losses for the two in the stroke and 7 seat in Oxford. You've really got a feel for them. Such a strong start to the race over the first 20 strokes or so. But Cambridge coming back at them and holding off Oxford hopes for a 7th year in a row. So whilst we wait to hear from the winning and losing crews, let's have a quick look back at the race. And what an extraordinary contest it was for the 78th women's boat race. This was the start. Oxford off really strongly from the line just by Putney Bridge. First 20 strokes saw them take a lead of a good half a length as they flew down the Thames towards Craven Cottage. Joe Gillette, you can see there urging his athletes on. Hannah Murphy in the Cambridge cox seat, just making sure that Cambridge kept in touch with Oxford as they headed down the turn towards Hammersmith Bridge, just about to come into view around the corner up in the distance. Cambridge settling into that rhythm. Oxford, after the strong start, just beginning to slow down. And this is where Cambridge started to come back at Oxford, as they fly down towards Hammersmith Bridge. This was the controversy. This was the incident. Warnings for both Oxford and Cambridge. In the end, it was Oxford who came off the worst, and the gap widening with every stroke as Cambridge headed for victory at Chiswick Bridge. So the celebrations beginning for Cambridge on the banks of the Thames at Chiswick. And a win against the odds for a 7th in a row for Cambridge, completely dominant in the women's boat race in recent times. And for Oxford, you can see the bitter disappointment. And the legs of the Oxford rowers will hurt 10 times more than the legs of the Cambridge rowers, who will be carried on a wave of elation out of their boat and towards their team, their families and friends waiting to embrace them, congratulate them. And there are the celebrations for Cambridge. Tears and emotion and jubilation. Underdogs on paper, but the belief of this crew is what carried them through. Hannah Murphy, the cox, doing such a brilliant job to keep their heads up when they fell behind. Disbelief and elation on the faces of Megan Lee, Claire Holt, Iris Powell there in the background. We heard from her earlier on what it would mean to win the boat race. The boat's coming out of the water and we're about 25 minutes away from the men's race. But the women's race for 2024, done and dusted. Just the 2 returning rowers in the crew. From last year's Cambridge crew, Karina Graff and Cambridge president Gemma Armstrong, who tasted victory last year. Back-to-back wins for them. And there they are, the victorious 8, alongside Cox Hannah Murphy. And we'll let the athletes have their moment in the sunshine. And hopefully, shortly, we'll be able to hear from the winning crew. Paddy Ryan, the coach for Cambridge. His experience and his the winning dynasty of crews that he's managed to build up has once again prevailed in the women's boat race. Absolutely perfect conditions on the Thames today. Smooth, calm water, bright sunshine, 15 degrees. Perfect conditions to get those muscles working and power these boats down the river. Cambridge now lifting their victorious vessel from the water. And the crowds will turn their attention back down the river. But almost time to hear from the victorious Cambridge crew. Lee Mackenzie has managed to grab 3 of them.
My goodness, some incredibly happy people here. I'm going to say against the odds, but I'm not quite sure why when you've dominated this for so many years. And Oxford made such a good start. We're going to show the bump in just a moment, but try and sum up the emotions.
Yeah, I think just crossing the line, we were just all super proud. Like, no matter what the ruling was, like, we knew that was the fastest race we could put down and that was the best race we could do. And it was just like, I think, pure pride on our part. Like, we knew that was the best race we could put down today and we were just incredibly happy with it, no matter what happened.
Tell us about the start.
I mean, yeah, I think we had a good start, but I know that our strongest feature is our base pace. We were really confident in it. We knew it was what our strength was, and we just believed in that the whole way through and knew that was our power that could bring us back through, and that's what happened. So I'm really proud of us.
And when you came running up, you were shouting to people, "Oh my goodness, I'm way too old for this." You're definitely not too old for this, Jenna.
Oh gosh, yeah, no, that was incredible, and I feel like each year it just keeps getting better and better, and that was one epic race. I don't think the women's race has ever been that close on the Tideway, and that's what we want. That's what we want for women's sport. That's what we want for us, and that was epic.
There was a lot of discussion at the end with the umpire about the bump. I just want you to take a look at this and talk us through it from your point of view.
Sure.
Cambridge.
So what were you feeling in the boat at the moment?
At the moment, I was feeling just happy that we had sort of found our rhythm, and then obviously seeing them closer and closer. I knew we were on our station. I had even moved slightly off our station, and I was really confident that I was in the right there, and I just wanted us to get right back on our rhythm as soon as possible. And I think you can kind of see there we just immediately take off. Like, we were confident that we just needed to keep moving and get ourselves basically out of the situation as fast as possible.
Jenna, no doubt in your mind at all?
I trust Hannah 100%, and that's why she was selected, to be the cox for this race. And so, quite frankly, in 4-seat, my job is to trust and my job is to go. And so, I knew she was in the right place, and so I just put my head down, I listened to what she said, and I did it. And we all did it, and that was incredible.
Huge congratulations. Go join the rest of your crew and enjoy this moment. Thank you.
Well, a first boat race victory for Hannah Murphy, the cox of Cambridge. She did such a remarkable job in intense pressure, steering her crew through that onslaught from Oxford. The contact from the Oxford boat, and to a 7th consecutive victory. And for the president of the Cambridge crew, Jenna Armstrong, at 30 years old. What an achievement for Jenna to win the boat race once again. Still plenty of action to come from the Tideway, and the 250,000 spectators down there are all set for the men's race, which will begin shortly. All kinds of positions at which to get the best view of the action. Big screens put up along the banks of the Thames. And all of those spectators, human and animal, just digesting the excitement that they've seen. Cambridge beating Oxford by some distance in the end. But what a race. One for the ages on the Tideway for the women of Oxford and Cambridge. But it's Cambridge with an historic 7th victory in a row. The dominance of the light blues continues in the women's race. So elation for Cambridge, but heartbreak for Oxford. The favourites on paper, and 3 members of the Oxford crew speaking to Lee Mackenzie.
Thanks very much. Ella, as a president, if we start with you, try and sum up the emotions, if you will.
It's incredibly hard. It's a hard day for the Oxford Women's Blue Boat. Massive congratulations to Cambridge. It was a great race up there, and just as us, they've put in so much leading up to today, and incredible respect for that. But today is not just one race, it's a representation of 7 months of work, and it's a representation of so much that's been going on at Oxford. And I don't think today represents all the success that we've had this year at Oxford, all that Alan French has brought to it. And I just think anyone that's considering rowing Oxford, Cambridge, so much success is coming to Oxford women, and this result doesn't represent that at all. So apply to Oxford.
Joe, tell us about the bump from your point of view. I mean, we heard you really vociferous at the end talking to the umpire. In your mind, it was all legit?
In my mind, it happened just after Cambridge had been warned, and I didn't think they'd moved back. Therefore, in my head, it was happening in our water. Obviously, that's from my point of view in the heat of the moment. It'll be something might go look back at some point, probably not soon. But having discussed with the umpire and looked at the past few years' races, it was a potential move which could lead to disqualification if it had happened with Cambridge in our water. Unfortunately, after Richard, the umpire, conferred again with the rest of the umpires, they concluded it didn't happen in our water, so the race stands. But yeah.
Okay, listen, thank you very much for talking to us. I really appreciate your honesty. Thank you. Thank you.
You can hear the disappointment in Joe Gillett's voice there. The women's race done and dusted. Heartbreak for Oxford, and the celebrations can begin for the Cambridge women. Next, it's over to the men. 7 months of effort boiling down to 20 minutes. So how do you go about putting together a boat race crew? Well, it all begins at the start of the academic year in September when the students return to university. And then the coaches narrow down their selections just before Christmas with the trial eights. The university rowing squad split into 2 boats which go head to head. There's no A boat or B boat. The rowers are mixed up, so it's a tight race. This is a test of skill, stamina, and who has the mettle for the big race in the spring. And this is how Oxford selected their men's boat race crew.
And we're underway now, near on 20 minutes to go in the Oxford University men's trial eights for the 2024 boat race season. And wow, that's a really punchy start from Panic there on the right-hand side of your screen.
Yeah, they're just coming past the commentary box now, and we can see that the crew in white, Panic, it's a slight lead, although we talked earlier about the water being nice and flat, but actually with 3 races now having gone down, it's starting to look a little bit bumpy.
Yeah, one of the things actually to note is the river's not closed for trial eights. There's still plenty of traffic going up and down. We've had the launches whiz up and down for both the women's race, the lightweight races. So these guys will have the worst of it when it comes to that bounce. And it's similar on boat race day, right, Zoe?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only what's gone before them, but also the fact that the river's much higher. So the higher the river gets, the more water there is, the bumpier it gets as well. So actually, you know, these guys are going to have potentially the more challenging conditions.
And Matthew Pinson there getting the flag out. You can just see in that umpire's boat behind. And I found it very interesting going to the women's briefing, the umpire's briefing. Richard Phelps talked about looking at where the bow balls are heading 4 lengths ahead, right? That's exactly what Matthew Pinson is looking for, is to try and avoid any collision 4 lengths prior than call it as it comes. Now look at this. I think we've had a change in lead for the first time in this race. Noise looking a little bit bouncy actually. I have been noting that wash definitely not subsiding, and it is certainly a bit of a choppy part of the course, this.
Yeah, that doesn't look particularly comfortable to row in. They seem to be keeping it pretty clean, but as you can see by the sort of the waves on the side of the boat against the yellow, you can see there's some real sort of riffle through the water.
Well, Panic, I think, are losing seat by seat here on the approach into Hammersmith. They haven't managed to transfer that confidence after leading out of the start into this middle part of the race. And I think if they're not careful here, Zoe, this can be a real sort of motivation killer, right? Being sliced through by a crew like this.
Yeah, the crews are coming together quite tight now. So I think, you know, if I was Noise, I would just want to make sure that I gave my crew enough space to use this. You know, they're rowing really well, they are moving away, they're on the inside of the bend, but look, they're coming so close together. You've got to be really careful at this point, and it looks like actually the 2-seat in the Panic boat, the trailing boat, just missed a bit of a stroke there, and this is what we were saying with practicing the clashing. They didn't clash there, but it's about really holding your rhythm when another boat gets close to you.
Now, Zoe, I'm going to come to you on this. We've got a bit of a station switch going on. Now, how common is this, and at what point as a cox do you choose to, you know, sort of do a manoeuvre like this?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because if something happened in your boat now, so if someone caught a crab, for example, and you know, the boat stopped dead or lost speed really quickly, or they hit something, you know, so many things in a race like this can happen, and the other crew surged back up to them, it causes a huge problem for the umpire. And theoretically, if you could say that crew was well off their station, you know, they could be disqualified. I suspect Will has thought that, because he now looks like he is moving back more towards his own station. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because, you know, you want to shut the door on a crew, but equally, if you're that far ahead, and do you need to take the risk? You know, is there anything to gain from doing that? If you're confident and you think you're going to keep moving away, your best option might be just to keep somewhere safe. But equally, if you think, well, I don't want to take the risk that, you know, this crew might move back, maybe you are a little riskier to give yourself just that little extra advantage.
In this trailing crew in Panic, they'll be doing everything, I'm sure, to sort of boost up those, you know, fringe ends of the squad to be as strong as possible.
Yeah, very much so. You want to. It's all very well and good having a fantastic top end, but you need that depth as well, especially if people are going to get illness, an injury. You want to be able to sort of call up athletes who you're not going to be worried about slotting into a boat.
And also worth mentioning that Oxford have fewer returners from the blue boat than Cambridge do, so these experiences absolutely vital for the whole squad.
Well, floating towards the finish now, really pressing the legs down powerfully into the final few strokes. Nothing left really to row out of this trialates race for Oxford. This is Noyes coming in towards the line. Victorious Alex Underwood, Isaac Throsby, Hamish Rimmer, Freddie Orpin, Elliot Kemp, Elias Kuhn, Fred Roper and Saxon Stacey will cross the line, and that famous Blues post just outside of Tideway Scullers School, and followed by Panic, the trailing crew.
It was Panic versus Noyes, with Noyes taking the spoils in the trialates. 4 of that crew have been selected to row in the blue boat for Oxford. Lenny Jenkins wasn't in the winning boat that day back in the depths of winter, but he had the pedigree to make it into the Oxford 8 for today's race. He started rowing in New Zealand while he was at school, being tall and strong. But once he went to Yale University in the United States for his undergraduate degree, he was no longer eligible to row for New Zealand, and instead used his dual citizenship to start training with British rowing. He picked Oxford for his postgraduate studies, and now here he is preparing to take on the boat race one last time.
I'm studying sustainability, enterprise and the environment, so that's sort of the business strategy of how we get to net zero and achieve greater sustainability worldwide. So a lot of it's to do with balancing development objectives, increasing human well-being, but also doing it in a way that doesn't jeopardize the future of coming generations. So for me, I feel like I'm really, really lucky to have had a chance to go to some of these amazing universities, mainly through my rowing, and the way that I kind of deal with that that feeling of, well, should I be here, is to try and work out how do I take what I've learned and try and have a positive impact on people. I was incredibly tall from day one, just absolutely dreadful at different sports, and rowing was the one sport that really people kept telling me, oh, you could be really good at this, you could one day go on to do amazing things with it. And then we were really lucky to be incredibly successful in high school. I rowed with my brothers, we won 5 national titles with 5 people, so we had a really, really good time in high school. It was a big family affair. And then when I arrived at Yale, it was a revitalization of this passion for the sport. I was right, okay, this is it. I really, really want to go to the Olympics. What I didn't really realize was going into the senior national team was that there's an emotional aspect of this that isn't really brought in. I struggled really, really badly with my mental health and the rowing team while I was there, and I think, indicated to me this is actually not something I really want to be a part of anymore, and coincided with me getting into Oxford, so it was a beautiful, refreshing kind of motion to get me into the sport in that way. We're very lucky with Sean and with the coaching team in that we do have a pretty robust selection set up. I think that's a big, important part of a successful rowing team. Looking at it from like a social aspect at Oxford, I'm surrounded by 25 people from 19 different nationalities in my cohort, and we get to do amazing things together. Every conversation that I've had with these guys is just fantastic. They're inspiring individuals. The cards will fall as they will, but I aspire to be the guy that shows up at a race and goes, we have done everything in our power to win this race, but I've made the decision that this will be my last race. I will miss this sport dearly, and I think to finish it with something that I can look back on for the rest of my life and think, we did that, we overcame the adversity, and we nailed that, and we absolutely crushed Cambridge. That would be the perfect way for me to end my rowing career.
For the Oxford crew today, and what must be going through his head as he takes to the water, knowing this will be his last race. Cambridge crews go through the same selection process as Oxford, a race on the Tideway between 2 boats of the squad members hoping for a place in the blue boat come boat race day. This is how they got on much choppier waters on the Thames winter.
Both crews off cleanly now. They're going to try and get into their rhythm. I tell you what, it must be really strange having to start down after a bend like that.
Yeah, really strange, isn't it? So the advantage as we go round under Hammersmith Bridge will be to the crew on the left, who are the Zoolander crew. Crews coming very close together there, Emery.
Absolutely, yeah. Crews coming together very early on, but keeping it clean for now. It's going to be up to Zoolander now to put pressure on Hansel. They know that their race needs to be won by the end of the Surrey Bend, so they're anticipating a shorter race, whereas Hansel, by contrast, looking to just hold over that.
Well, this is a sharp steer in now. The crews are barely clear of each other, but they're almost line astern once again. That is a tight line that Savannah is taking underneath Hammersmith.
Absolutely. I mean, it was hard to tell from the camera angle we had there, but if you were in Savannah's position, the trailing boat in Hansel, you would basically be wanting to try and almost hit Zoolander, hit that boat. If you can do that, you force a foul and the race is over and you've won. It looks like Zoolander's just got into a safe enough position now, but the crews are quite close.
Well, yeah, the Zoolander crew, as you're saying, they were really long out forward, so they're reaching round out in front of their riggers. The blades are in the water for a long time. I mean, they do look rowing a slightly different standard to their teammates.
Yeah, I would agree. I think they do look the classier crew right now. What's going on in there, it's only up for us to kind of imagine, but it looks like there's really good leadership all the way down that boat in how we're trying to row and how they want their boat to look and feel. Not ideal from the coach's point of view right now. I'm sure they want it to be a little bit closer, but the race is, we're not even halfway yet, so let's see how this next bend unfolds.
So Barnes Bridge awaits us in the background there. We're looking at the crew Hansel in the white, as we have been for most of this contest, stroked by the 23-year-old Matt Edge, the chemist, PhD from St Catherine's. 84 kilos, he's put on a bit of weight since he rode at a lightweight, which is down at 72.5 kilos, so he's certainly packed on the pounds and the muscle in the stern of that 8, and it's impressed Rob Baker, as we've said in commentary, but he's got a big job to do in the last part of this race.
Yeah, we just saw a look round again from Seb Benzacree, the president in the 5 seat. I always say when you see a look around from someone like that, you know that probably things aren't going to go very well for that crew. There's a bit of desperation creeping in now. They've only got about 4 minutes of the race left, and that's a huge margin to try and overturn. Zoolander really just took a hold of this race from the off and have just been able to stretch out that lead.
And I think if you look at the way that Hansel is rowing right now, it looks to me like that crew really believes that they can still do this. There's a lot of intent there. It's springy, it's light, and I think they've obviously seen what Savannah's done, and I think in their minds they're still in this.
So tailwinds, you could see from the Union flag flying on one of the pubs there at Barnes Bridge. It's a nice tailwind condition. Out in front, it's the Zoolander crew: Joe Travis, Orlando Morley, Tom Marsh, Gus John, Kenny Copeland, Noah Muel, Luca Ferraro, Martin Amatier, the Swede in the stroke seat, says, I think a film of his life will be portrayed by Dwayne Johnson, the Hulk, and Ed Bracey, the Cox. And she's coming very tight on that buoy. She's going to have to put the rudder on now, Savannah, isn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. I think whenever you go tight, tight on the bends, you've always got to make sure you're the correct side of the navigation buoys. So I think it's a bit more challenging in that way. So the line isn't as smooth as it might be. But I agree with Imogen that I think it's worth the risk when you're in the position that they were in.
They have moved back a little bit, haven't they, Imogen?
Yeah, I think that definitely got them distance. It's not going to be enough, but it looks like Zoolander is going to run away with this one. Joe Travis, Orlando Morley, Tom Marsh, Gus John, Kenny Copeland, Noah Muel, Luca Ferraro, Martin Ametier and Ed Bracey, and this has more of the newbies in it, so it's going to be their first taste of winning in Cambridge colours.
Yes, was this one of your picks?
No, I'm 0 for 2. But as they cross the line, that's a win for Zoolander.
Slaps on the back there in the middle of the boat. Gus John to Ken Copeland as Hansel crossed the line. It was a relatively close race. Interesting coxing in the final part of that race.
So the Oxford boats called Noise and Panic. The Cambridge boats took their names straight off the runway. Zoolander against his great modelling rival Hansel from the Ben Stiller movie. Let's hope they could turn both ways. In the end, 5 returning blues from last year's victorious boat from Cambridge, a more experienced crew than the Oxford 8. And out on the river, you can see both crews ready to go. Jelma Benema, Harry Glenster, Saxon Stacey, James Doran, Elias Kuhn, Frederick Roper, Leonard Jenkins, Elliot Kemp and William De Negri in the cock seat for Oxford, with Sebastian Benzekri, Noah Muel, Thomas Marsh, Augustus John, Kenneth Copland, Thomas Lynch, Luca Ferraro, Matt Edges for Cambridge, with Ed Bracey in the cox seat for the light blues. So Cambridge looking for a 6th win in 8 years. On paper, they're the underdogs against a bigger, stronger Oxford crew. But as we know from the women's race, the boat race not won on paper comes down to tactics, the water, and the heart of the 8 men in the boat. Time to rejoin your commentary team. Zoe de Toledo, Andrew Cotter and Matthew Holland.
Yeah, a sporting event that's not far off 200 years old and surrounded by the modern changing world. The growing skyline, it continues. The feeling of nerves and excitement, though, will be the same as they have always been. The desperation to be on a winning blue boat. There is the lineup for Cambridge, from Benzekri, the president, in the bow seat, to stroke Matt Edge, who's returning. And Ed Bracey will be steering them and urging them on and giving the instructions. And they're just beyond the Putney Rail Bridge is Putney Bridge itself, and just beyond them the two crews sit. Jelmer Benema in the bow seat, the Dutch rower, and all the way down only James Doran returning blue for Oxford, and Will Denegri in the coxing seat. Elliot Kemp the stroke. And interesting water conditions. Oh no, he can't get up there. God, I'll give it another shot. No, we'll come back to him. Anyway, Matthew Pinsent umpiring. And see Oxford now happy. So away they go on the waters, which are certainly not floating with both these crews. Usually that strong tide behind them, pushing them down the course here. But as they push off on the first of about 600 strokes here, and probably around about 20 minutes today in this sluggish water, who will get the better start, even at the moment?
It was very sharp from Cambridge, though. They rocketed out of the blocks. Oxford took a few more seconds to fill their blades up, but actually Oxford look like they've drawn level with Cambridge now. I thought Cambridge had an initial advantage, but it looks like Oxford are now in front.
The crews coming together here already, not what we expected. We expected that Middlesex crew, the Cambridge crew, to stay over to their side a little bit more with this slightly slacker tide, but they have come straight over to meet their opposition from Oxford.
Well, the booming voice of Matthew Pinsent rings out across the border, heard above the roars of the thousands on the Putney embankment. Both crews being warned to keep apart here, and then you can see the rudder. Look at the move that's being made there by Cambridge. Now, are they heading towards Craven Cottage, towards the wall, just to cut the corner a fraction?
I thought initially they were, but I think actually he was just giving his crew some space. But certainly that looks like that move from Ed Bracey has cost them a couple of seats. I think they were dead level just before Matt Pinsent started warning. Oh, it looks like I'm wrong.
Well, they are coming back together again, and the flag was held out by Matt Pinsent, and he's warning Cambridge again, and then the rudder wire will be pulled a fraction by the hand of Ed Bracey, and Cambridge do start to move, but oh my goodness, they're close together. Both crews now being warned. Zoe.
I think Will Denegri there, coxing that Oxford crew, has really just kept his boat straight. He is not messing around. He's giving his crew the chance to get into their best rhythm, which is so important at this point in the race.
What I think Ed Bracey is trying to do for Cambridge is get Cambridge right up in the face of Oxford and say, look, just off the start, we're already half a length up and we're right on your blade taps. What are you going to do about it? And by doing that, you put the pressure right on the opposition. You get right up in their face and give them and challenge them to respond.
Both crews being warned again. Both straying out of their own water, but we saw in the side-on shot that the bow seat, Seb Benzekri, the Cambridge president, and Noah Muele in the two-seat as well, are starting to pull clear. So Cambridge with the advantage now. Oxford being warned. The blades almost coming together.
This is a very dangerous moment now. When the blades are tip on tip like this, and you're in a position where Cambridge on the right of the screen are 3/4 of a length up, if there's a clash, the Cambridge stroke is taken out, and that means that the rhythm is disrupted. Whereas in Oxford, the bow seat is what's sacrificed, and the bow seat, although crucial for the power, doesn't contribute too much to the rhythm. So if you lose a bow seat, you can recover from that. If you lose your stroke, your rhythm is in trouble.
Clashing blades, and now both crews being warned again. You can see how close together they are, but you can also see the 4 or 5 seat lead that Cambridge have. Now again a reminder, Oxford are the slight favourites here. A powerful, very, very tall crew for Oxford. They are fancied to win this, but then again, so too the Oxford women were fancied to earn the victory in that race, and they could not. And Cambridge have the lead. Yes, they have the slight advantage of that early Middlesex bend, and Oxford will have the advantage of the long Surrey bend to come. But Cambridge are building a good lead here.
Listening to Cox Will Denegri for Oxford, he's been calling a push to just try and check that Cambridge advantage as they come off the end of their bend. And it looks like it's starting to work. It looks like Oxford are just holding in there as they come round the bend.
Look at the glances to the left that the Oxford crew have to see exactly where they are. Both crews being warned again because bow seat and stroke seat will be clashing. And then you can see that Cambridge did make a sharp move to the right there. How close they are, and Oxford still within touch. Both crews warned, so Cambridge will have to move to the right of the picture, towards the north bank, towards the Middlesex station. Cambridge being warned again, Zoe.
Oxford are moving now. They have seen that Cambridge are being warned. They are taking advantage of Cambridge's rudder going on, which means it will be acting as a brake, and Oxford are now moving back through.
The danger is when you're looking for that rhythm and then suddenly a blade is caught, it can disrupt the whole boat. There is Ed Bracey. You see the little touch, the gentle touch on the rudder wires there in the Cambridge boat.
Gosh, this is an absolute, again, a fantastic race. We've been so lucky today. Cambridge are, well, quite significantly up, but as they come into their bend, Oxford have done really well to come back. You hear umpire Matt Pinson naming Oxford Cox Will Denegri, and as an umpire, you only do that if you're really concerned. So I think Matt Pinson is starting to worry that actually these crews could tangle up together. But Cambridge have done really, really well here to get in front and hold. This is a substantial lead coming into the Harrods Bend.
Well, let's see if we can hear from Jasper Parish, winning Cox for Cambridge last year, down on the river watching. What have you made of it so far, Jasper?
Wow, what an impressive start from this Cambridge crew. I think they look the more relaxed crew right now. They're a bit more dynamic through the front end, and I think that's really going to benefit them in this tailwind. Let's not forget that the wind is going to swing around as they come past the island. The water might rough up quite a lot. And I think this Cambridge crew is either going to row away in the next sort of 2-3 minutes, or this Oxford crew is going to come right back into it. Don't forget, this is the start of the big Surrey advantage.
Well, there you can see it perfectly played out. This is the start of the Surrey bend, worth about 3/4 of the length. Then there's a bit of a straight into Chiswick Reach, and then a 1/4 of a length advantage to the Surrey station again. So Oxford have all that to come if they can remain in contact, which they are now. And Oxford will be looking for a push towards Hammersmith here.
You saw that actually. You saw Oxford start to take more strokes per minute, so they took their rate up. They are trying to make a move here around that bend. I think it's working, but is it working fast enough?
I actually think Oxford have just fallen behind a little bit. Cambridge are now getting warned. This is a big risk from both crews. This is gamesmanship at its best, but also high risk, high reward. If Ed Bracey, when he's getting warned for Cambridge, makes contact, he's in big trouble here and has made the umpire nervous by getting so close. He's steering a lovely course, actually. This is a very smooth bend round to Surrey, and it looks like they're about to get clear.
Well, Cambridge are being warned now to get back into their water. Again, they're just battling for this deep, fast stream that goes upstream against the flow of the river, but with the tide, although today there really isn't much carrying them along. But there is the lead. It's just about half a length in Cambridge as they come under Hammersmith Bridge. Now, the leading crew at Hammersmith Bridge, it's about 85% of the time that crew will go on to win, but that is not a significant lead at all.
Cambridge! Doesn't look like a significant lead at all. Although, interestingly, it hasn't moved much around that bend. I've been listening to the Oxford Cox Will Denegri in my ear, and he's been throwing quite a lot of his resources to try and get back up. And although they've now eaten up half of Cambridge's bend in their favour, actually, they're not going anywhere. They haven't clawed that much back, and Cambridge, I think, are getting into a position where they're going to be able to break clear. And as soon as you break clear in the boat race, it's very difficult to come back.
Just looking at the angle of Cambridge there, you can hear why Matthew Pinsent is just warning them a little bit. Just looks as if they're putting a squeeze on slightly in terms of coming across.
Yeah, what you can see is that their boat is not parallel to the riverbank. It is slightly across, which goes to show that they are slightly across the stream rather than pointing in the direction that umpire Matt Pinsent wants them to be pointed in. They're not going to give Matt Pinsent a break here. I think both crews, both Coxes are going to keep testing him.
Well, there is Ed Bracey, the cox for Cambridge, who follows in his father's footsteps. He coxed the Cambridge Blue Boat in the early 1990s. Will Denegri, the Oxford cox, very experienced at under-23 international level, but this is on the tideway. This is a very different challenge.
And there's a nice story with Ed Bracey there. His mother was the Oxford Reserve cox, Isis, in 1991 when his father coxed against Cambridge, and they had to keep that relationship secret from their crews.
Oh, intrigue. We'll talk about that afterwards. Clear water there as Cambridge take the lead. So now Cambridge can come across into Oxford water, but Oxford have the... You would think surely with the power they have there that there's something left in reserve, but what a move that Cambridge have put on here.
I think you have to remember as well what an extremely tough race this is physically. It's about 3 times the length of your standard Olympic race, and the suffering that these athletes go through is really it's brought to the forefront because we can get right up in their faces with these, with where our cameras are. So I think you will see even that strong Oxford crew at this point, they are really going to be suffering. Their legs are going to be screaming, their lungs are going to be screaming, but they've got to keep holding on here.
Look at how lively that Cambridge rhythm is. It's absolutely beautiful to watch. Coach Rob Baker has done a really, really good job here with what are essentially 8 slight underdog athletes. They're coming forward, that's where they slide with their blades out of the water really, really smoothly, and then they put the blades in so decisively. It's beautiful to watch. What a lovely rhythm.
And that is what's said about the crews that Rob Baker brings together. Sometimes they are greater than the sum of the parts. Fine rowers in this boat, but they come together and they work as a unit so beautifully together.
You saw there the 2-seat of Oxford, Harry Glenister, looking round, and at this level he won't be able to see Cambridge, and that's pretty disheartening for them.
Well, we don't see it with that view. All we see are the churning waters. Oh, police are coming, just keeping a keen eye on everything on the banks. Huge crowds out watching today in the spring sunshine, and all the puddles are being sent down as well. I think that's what Ed Bracey was saying, or words to that effect. They're sending down the puddles towards them because Oxford are now having to come through that dirty water. And I didn't expect it to be this kind of lead. When we saw them coming under Hammersmith, you wouldn't have thought it would be that margin at this stage, but Cambridge have put a massive move on.
They have, and I think that's a testament to their rhythm, to be honest. Listening to Ed Bracey, the Cambridge cox, he hasn't asked for anything massive. He's just been saying, trust in what you're doing, trust in this rhythm, and it's working. They're rowing away. He's having to look around his shoulder to see what's going on.
And actually, he looks quite relaxed there, I'd say.
And I think in this Oxford crew, all you've got to do now is trust in your rhythm and trust that you've been prepared well, that your rhythm is going to carry you back, and trust in the cox. Will Denegri has a rather unenviable job here of having to try and convince his crew that they're still in the race. But I'm by no means relaxed. My heart is still quite high. I think we shouldn't switch off yet. This is going to be something quite special, I think.
No, don't switch off. Don't switch off anybody. Big lead though for Cambridge, and again you look at the recent dominance, not quite the same as in the women's boat race, but if you look at the last 5 results, Cambridge have won 4 of them. Yes, there was that win for Oxford in 2022. Both crews were very impressive. A lot of Olympians in the crews. This time it's different, with a lot of not less experienced rowers, very experienced university rowers, and a lot of international flavour in there as well. But they're not Olympians and gold medal winners, but Cambridge have come together so well again.
They might not have the international experience, but they've got the boat race experience. And I think in a race where awareness of the tactics of the race is so important, that's what we're seeing play out here. Is we're seeing an understanding of the river, an understanding of the water, an understanding of how the boat race can turn.
Just hearing Will Denegri saying they're flagging now, and that is where you have to be the effective liar, persuader that you can still do this, but starting to close a bit, that there as he says that again, you just have to keep saying it. You almost have to believe it as well.
You have no choice. If you sit there saying, oh, they're rowing away from us, then you're doing a terrible job. And I think actually Will's doing a good job, but listening to his calls, he's definitely trying to keep the rhythm alive. It looks a little bit like Oxford are starting to flag. I think the timing of their blades going into the water is starting to look a little less neat than it was, which would suggest that they're starting to tire. You see there the face of Yelma Venema at stroke and Harry Glenister at 2.
Yeah, just run down the boat there. Saxon Stacey, youngest in the crew. James Doran, the only returning blue. Elias Kuhn, the German. Fred Roper of Australia. Lenny Jenkins. Elliot Kemp in the stroke seat. And then Will Denegri is the cox, but they are being outclassed by Cambridge. And again, this will be very, very hard to take for Oxford because they believed they had a wonderful, well, not a wonderful crew.
The line was about right for the boat race line.
Okay, well, just a chat between Boris Rankoff and Matthew Pinsent.
The only contact I think we had was under both crews. Do you agree with that? Oh, fine.
I just wonder what they're talking about.
I think they're just discussing that slight clash that happened just by the Black Boy Craven Cottage era. It looks like because there's not that much going on in the race, he's just getting his head in the right place so that should there be an appeal, he can give a definitive answer. Because you want to get your mind set, and sometimes as an umpire, it's very useful to have a second opinion. Boris Rankoff, an extraordinarily experienced umpire in the boat race here. But that lead for Cambridge in this picture shot is absolutely enormous. And the feeling in the Cambridge boat must be pretty awesome right now.
Boris Rankoff, who rode 6 times in the boat race, he studied classics, just went on and on studying classics and kept on coming back and rowing. Matthew Pinsent, who rode in 3 boat races, won 2 and then lost as president for Oxford after he'd won gold in Barcelona. But this is an enormous lead. And actually looking at the recent results between the two, there haven't been big blowout wins. 2018, Cambridge won by 3 lengths, but since then it's always been pretty close. And before that, pretty close, going back to 2015 when Oxford won by 6.5 lengths, but a lot went on in that race as well. This is going to be a huge margin.
Again, Levany Jenkins in the 7th seat for Oxford on screen now took a big look around his shoulder, and he will be very, very disheartened to see that. Presumably he can't even see their boat at all.
Well, let's go down one more time to Jasper Parish, who is following the race. And Jasper, as a Cambridge man, you must be very proud, but what a push was made in the middle of that race.
Oh, I'm mightily proud by this Cambridge crew. I'm just trying to imagine what's going through my housemate Seb Benzacree's mind right now. You know, he's watching this race from the bow seat of Cambridge. He can see it all unfolding. He's just watching Oxford drift away and away. And it must be the best feeling in the world. I think Ed Bracey's doing a great job of just keeping them relaxed, keeping them in their rhythm. I think they're rowing better and better into this headwind as the race goes. And the last thing maybe to say is that just I think the umpires are very much expecting a hand here from Will Denegri. We should expect him to appeal this. It seems like they've had a thought or two on the boat about what might come of it. But who knows what's going to happen here.
Well, we had the discussion between Boris Rankoff and Matthew Pinsent, the umpire, and I don't think they're going to get much joy from that. So Ed Bracey and this Cambridge crew, as they near Barnes Bridge in the central span, and they'll head through with... So what the lead is now, my goodness, that's a 5-length lead or so. It's going to be a huge victory for Cambridge, and again one that will be, you know, sometimes you, as a beaten boat, you know that you've pushed hard and you've rowed well, but I'm not sure this one. There'll be a lot of suffering and inquiries after this one for Oxford.
I'm afraid the pattern of movement in the Oxford boat looks very laboured now. You can see the timing on the blades isn't very good. The height on the blades is different as they approach the water. This is a crew that has suffered, and I think they will struggle to come back.
It's interesting, Zoe, as well, talk beforehand about the lack of time on the water that Oxford have had over the winter, because Wallingford, where they train, yes, they've gone to Caversham, the international base, where they get more placid waters to work on, but because of the flooding, they've had far less time on the water than Cambridge, who row on the more stable River Grey 2s out at Ely.
Yeah, Cambridge was saying they haven't missed a single planned rowing session this season, whereas Oxford, I think at one point, was saying they'd only rowed something like 10 sessions in about 3 months on the water. You can actually see here how much Cambridge is struggling. Look at the blade, the oar of the stroke seat, Matt Edge. It's barely going in the water
he's
now.
in trouble, Matt
Look
Edge.
at his head. His head's going right down there.
As we saw in the race last year with Oxford stroke Felix Drinkle, Matt Edge is struggling. The rest of the 7 of them just need to relax him. They need to say, don't worry, we're nearly there. Just put the blade in, take the blade out. But this could be fantastic. For Oxford, this could be the chance to get back in. My goodness me.
I'm not sure there's enough time, but it makes a big difference. Matt Edge, former lightweight, and again, that can have a big effect as well when you've tried to make the weight, and he's lacking the power. And I remember said Mark German, who's a former lightweight himself, really struggling, and the blade was hardly going into the water a good few years ago now, but it can make a big difference. So the stroke in the Cambridge boat, Matt Edge, who comes back after winning last year, you can see his head's gone, and so this is where Ed Bracey now is the man who is right in front of him, just has to keep him going.
They've just got to get across the finish line. If I was Cambridge Cox Ed Bracey, I'd be saying, right, Luca Ferraro in 7, you stroke the boat, guys in the bow 4, let's get some legs on, just get us across the finish, then we'll get Matt the help he needs. I think they're going to win, but this is going to take a big effort, and Matt Edge has left too much on the course here, my goodness.
His blade is barely grazing the water now. There is not enough time for Oxford to come back. If the race were another 400 metres longer, then Oxford might have a chance. Matt Edge, though, what you can guarantee is that he will keep moving in that boat and keep moving that oar, because you know you're doing it not for yourself but for your crew.
He's an enormously talented athlete, an enormously gifted chemist, and he will get the boat across the line. I have absolute confidence in him.
The only danger here is if his oar gets stuck in the water, what rowers call catching a crab. That's the only danger here, because that will stop the boat in its tracks.
Well, Matt Edge is spent, but the race is nearly run as well. They are heading for the finish line, and Cambridge are going to hold on. And what an effort by all of them, not least Matt Edge, because he is gone, but he's still pulling on that oar for Cambridge and for another victory. Oxford are closing, but they're not going to have enough river left to overhaul this light blue crew. And they came in not as the favourites in this race, but against the odds. They have done it, and now Matt Edge will collapse, and they will get some help to him. But they'll celebrate in that boat a victory which they might have believed they would have had, but a few people said it would have been a dark blue victory in this men's boat race. But it goes to Cambridge again.
I'm speechless. That was one of the most terrific rows I've seen. Cambridge again, like last year, went in underdogs, and they've just pulled it out of the bag in a manner I've not seen in a boat race in a very, very long time. Matt Edge in the stroke suit will be getting the help he needs. But I think in the Oxford camp, they now need to ask some very, very serious questions. Oxford have 8 very talented athletes here who I think have been let down by a system where they just weren't able to row well enough to keep their head in the game. They were several lengths down as they come alongside the Ayot, and we see this year and year again in the past 5 years, I think.
Well, we're just going to see if we will have the protest. I think we will. It does happen quite often, but I think Matthew Pinsent already has his explanation and his answer. But we'll just listen in, because Will Denegri, he's building a case here in his head.
I can't think of a case that will be able to turn this around. I think utter despondence in the Oxford crew.
I'm not sure he's even going to go. I think Seb Benzacre there,
We get him in there.
the president in the bow seat. I'm not sure Will Denegri is going to appeal.
I think Will's a sensible guy. I think he knows that he tried, he did his part, he did what he needed to try and do, but I think he knows that that was not going to change the outcome of the race.
No, his head is bowed not in thought but in despair, and the result is there, confirmed, and it will be Cambridge again who have won the men's boat race, and what is that now, 5 in 6 of the last races. So again, if it's not the same dominance that we've seen in the women's, it's not far off. But this was them coming across the line, and Oxford some way down. We'll get official confirmation of the margin of victory. And again, a word for Matt Edge. You know, we talk about bravery in sport, but he will have known that the last thing in his mind, his exhausted body and his addled mind will have been, I'm not going to stop rowing.
After the races, so this evening, that each club has a dinner where all of the old blues and the old reserves from the clubs come back and celebrate this achievement of the crews. And I guarantee you Matt Edge will get the biggest clap as he walks in. To have left it all on the track, quite literally, for your university and for your club is something that should be praised to the utmost. And the atmosphere at the dinner in Cambridge will be absolutely brilliant. I remember in 2019 when we won with my crew, all of the old blues were there, and the roar as you walk into the dinner hall. And then they all go out to the nightclub afterwards to celebrate. And I remember the oldest blue, who was 87, came with us in his Zimmer frame and was dancing with the victorious crew in his Zimmer frame on the nightclub dance floor. And it's the most amazing atmosphere ever.
Well, Matt Edge might borrow that frame tonight, but anyway, he will have the salve of being a winner and of giving everything there. That was an amazing effort from this Cambridge crew. We talked about all the returning blues, and again that continuity that Rob Baker, the coach, had mentioned, and they were rowing as a crew, as a unit.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's Rob Baker that I think we should mention. You know, we talk about Sean Bowden a lot. His 30th year, he said he wasn't counting the years, but Rob Baker has been around this race since 2001. He has been there a long time. He understands the racecraft. And having those returning blues means you do have that continuity and that understanding of the racecraft.
What's amazing as well is that Rob Baker has climbed up through the ranks. He started as an 18-year-old boatman at CBC, towing the trailers and fixing the boats. And he learned under a series of successive Cambridge coaches how to coach. And now he's built his own style and built his own programme that's showing to be unbelievably successful.
Well, as the waters of the Thames rise up towards the Mortlake Anglian and Alpha Boat Club, it is just a very short journey from the boats to start the celebrations with the reserve crews and the women's crew. Cambridge in the men's and the women's have done it again in the sunshine on the Thames.
Well, two thrilling races on the Tideway, and you can see the water now lapping against the steps at Mortlake. There is Matt Edge just getting some water on board. Real concern for him crossing the line. The Cambridge men's stroke seat leaving everything out on the water, but a winner once again for Cambridge. He was part of the winning crew last year, and now he's needing help to get out of the boat. Hopefully, after a little bit of rest, some medical help, taking some calories and water on board, Matt Edge will be back on his feet and ready to celebrate with the Cambridge crew. 5 wins in the last 6 years for Cambridge, and just a really brilliantly masterminded race from the Cox Ed Bracey in his first boat race in the Cambridge Blue Boat. Celebrations there. Luca Ferraro, also part of the winning crew last year. Braces for Seb Benzakri, bearded bow seat athlete at the back. Also part of that victorious team. Once again, tasting elation and victory in the boat race. 12 months on from that win last year for Cambridge. They've done it again here. And there is the despondent crew from Oxford. Favourites to win the race, but as Andrew and the commentary team mentioned during the race coverage there, you've got to wonder how much time lost on the water has cost Oxford in this boat race season. Their boat house and their various facilities flooded multiple times because we've had so much rainfall this British winter time and so much time on the water lost for Oxford, whereas Cambridge have been able to train right the way through the winter, haven't missed a session on the water, and it's Cambridge who come out victorious.
You film.
So a quick look back on the race. So Matthew Pinsent, twice a winner of the boat race, getting the action underway. A sharp start from Cambridge. And then Oxford managed to get themselves back into it in those really early stages. And the crews coming together really early on. Warnings for both crews right at the start of the boat race as the boats approached the turn at Craven Cottage. Lots of bellowing from Matthew Pinson. He was kept busy during this race, wasn't he, as both crews battled for that fast water on the incoming tide. And at this point, Oxford still very much in the boat race. Cambridge with a narrow lead, which they never relinquished from this point onwards. Ed Bracey urging his 8 on. You can see Matt Edge there towards the finish line at Chiswick Bridge, his head hanging. He's left absolutely everything out on the water. He can barely get the blade in the water. But by that point, Cambridge had done enough. And they were winners of the 169th boat race. And we can hear from the winning president, Seb Benzakri, who is talking now at the finish to Lee Mackenzie.
Well, Seb, try and sum up what this means to be out there and do it again.
I mean, to have that race, as you know, that was my last race with the club, and it's been 4 unbelievable years. And you know, probably going into it, this was the biggest challenge we've had The Oxford crew, really classy unit, really good guys. So, you know, we knew we had to put a lot into it and push ourselves to a place where, you know, we very rarely go. But that was just the most unbelievable feeling. So hard to put into words. Just so proud of the guys, so proud of Goldie. They put all of themselves into this season. You know, you have to put so much into it. No one ever backed off for a single second, so I can't ask for any more.
The Coxes seemed determined to give Matt Pinson quite a stressful afternoon, but it was so close for such a long time out there. And even when we saw Matt struggling out there, it just shows you what a tight unit, what a tight crew you all are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, credit to Matt to go that deep. I'm sure a lot of that margin that we took early in the race was him. You know, he was putting down such a dynamic rhythm, and that takes a lot out of you in the stroke seat. So, you know, so proud of him, and yeah, I mean, just an amazing race. Really came together. Yeah.
Seb, huge congratulations. Go and celebrate with the crew. Thank you.
Absolute delight. You can see what it means to win the boat race, and conversely, you can imagine how it feels to lose the boat race. Oxford just getting their boat there out of the water on the steps of Mortlake. There's the trophy for the winners, already bedecked in the light blue ribbons of Cambridge University. So there'll be presentations of medals for the winning crews, and the celebrations can begin for both Cambridge crews. The women winning the 7th year in a row, the Cambridge crew, while for Cambridge men, a 5th win in 6 years. Oxford must go back to the drawing board for the boat race next year. And now the banks of the River Thames can gradually empty. Boat houses all the way down this stretch of the river. It's famous, of course, because of the boat race and because of the conditions for rowing. And there'll be parties and gatherings in pubs and boathouses along the river on what has been an absolutely glorious afternoon in southwest London. Look at those scenes across Putney, looking out towards the City of London in the distance, and 15 degrees, warm and sunny, light winds, absolutely beautiful. Seb Ben-Zakri just cooling off in the water there. Bananas taking on some much needed calories and minerals. So those are the scenes at Mortlake where Cambridge have won the boat race once again. Heartbreak for Oxford, who were favourites coming into the race, but come away with that horrible, sinking, losing feeling, none worse than at the boat race. We can catch up with Lee Mackenzie, who's with one of the crew.
Thanks very much, Lenny. You've just been watching that analysis. A hard watch, a hard race out there. Just sum up the emotions.
I mean, I don't really have any words. We had a clear plan of what we wanted to do, and we had a really good setup for that. And the last couple of days have been amazing. The boys have taken another step on, and then, you know, just didn't, for some reason, just didn't come together on the day, and that's really disappointing. But like, you know, it's been a great battle with the guys. You know, everybody's put everything into it. I couldn't be prouder of them. It's a shame that results don't suit that, but Cambridge showed their class. They're a really top group of athletes, and yeah, they did to us what we wanted to do to them.
You're standing here in the heat of the battle. You're an experienced rower. Do you know what the point of difference was out there today?
Maybe experience. I'm not sure. I mean, I really didn't expect it to be such a big difference. I
I will also say, and this is in no way to take away from Cambridge, but we've had a few guys go down pretty badly with the E. coli strain. So, I mean, this morning I was throwing up, and I really wasn't sure that there was going to be a chance for me to be in the boat, but I ultimately kept that quiet, and that's on my shoulders. I'm not sure if it was the right choice, because I really didn't feel like I had much to give in that, but it would have been taking one of the top guys out of ISIS and ruining their chances. So I felt like we needed to give them a fair fight. But yeah, it would have been ideal not to have so much poo in the water. But that's not to take away from Cambridge. They were a talented crew. I don't know if we would have had a chance to get them, even if we'd all been on form. So it's no way to make excuses.
Lenny, thank you very much.
Lenny Jenkins there, obviously bitterly disappointed, and as we heard earlier on in our coverage, it'll be his last race in an Oxford boat, and you can tell that he was dearly hoping that there would be a different outcome for him as he signs off on his Oxford University rowing career. Presentations just in preparation on the banks of the Thames at Mortlake. We'll be heading to those shortly to see Cambridge pick up the honours for both the men's and the women's race. And when you look out across the scenes in southwest London, it's hard to believe that rainfall has had such a disruptive effect on this year's boat race season. The Wallingford stretch of the river for Oxford and the boathouse they're on flooding regularly, which has had a significant impact on their ability to train on the water. We heard Lenny Jenkins there as well talking about a stomach bug that has been affecting the crew, and perhaps that's how they'll reflect on today's two big losses. But to take nothing away from Cambridge, they have been able to train as normal, and perhaps that was the difference. Oxford choosing to host their winter training camp on the Tideway in London. Cambridge men flew to Aviz in Portugal. Cambridge women out to Italy for their winter training. Oxford hoping to get a little bit more insight into the river. But it was Cambridge who came back to the Thames to take the victories in both. So the spectators enjoying a drink or two in the warm spring sunshine, shirt sleeves and outlandish rowing blazers as usual. And all of them training their eyes down to the boathouse steps at Mortlake, where Lee Mackenzie is ready to talk us through the presentations.
Welcome to the trophy presentations for the Gemini Boat Races 2024. First, we have the presentation for the 78th Women's Boat Race. Presenting the Women's Trophy is the Vice-Chancellor of Oxford University, Professor Irene Tracy, and Marcus Backey-Howard, the Head of Institutional at Gemini. First of all, commiserations must go to the Oxford University Boat Club. And now, let's welcome our winners onto the stage. Cambridge University Boat Club. Gemma King, Joe Matthews, Iris Powell, Karina Graf, Karis Earl, Claire Hull, Megan Lee, Hannah Murphy, the President, Jenna Armstrong, and the coach of Cambridge Women's, Paddy Ryan. Now, before you start spraying your English sparkling wine, courtesy of Chapel Down, I'd like to invite the President, Gemma, to take this wonderful trophy.
A magnificent success there for the Cambridge women.
Absolutely drenched. The Cambridge crew, Jenna Armstrong hoisting aloft that famous silver trophy, and it's now full of English sparkling wine. Blimey, she's doing a quick job of that. Celebrations for Cambridge and the Cambridge men's crew as well, just in the right-hand side of your picture there, waiting to go up for their moment on the stage. 7 wins in a row, though, for Cambridge. It really has been a dominant stretch for the light blues. And for Oxford, it'll be back to the drawing board ahead of next year's race, trying to find a way to break the stranglehold that Cambridge seem to have on this famous old fixture. So as we await the presentation for the men's crews, let's just take in the scene on the side of the River Thames. And do you know what? These pictures are the complete opposite to the type of weather we've been enjoying in the UK over the last few months. Unprecedented rainfall, the river, as you can see, brown and swollen. Cormorant just drying its wings there in finally some warmth. There's been a bit of wind for the past few weeks. Temperatures not climbing out of single figures, but today by the side of the Thames it's 15 degrees Celsius. There are no coats, glasses of champagne, and a spot for everybody to enjoy the action on what is always a special day in the British springtime sporting calendar. I wonder who's winning that race. Cream teas. And abundant wildlife. Nearly 200 years of history from the boat race, and this afternoon's action will go down surely as races for the ages. In the end, comfortable victories for Cambridge in both the men's and the women's races, but not without controversy. Both boats, the men's and the women's boat, coming together and delighting the crowds here. A spectacle and a rivalry that really captures the imagination, thanks to the history of the race and, of course, the dedication and effort of the athletes on that famous stretch of water between Putney and Mortlake. This is how Cambridge won their 7th women's boat race title in a row. Oxford off to the stronger of starts, really putting down a fast pace over the first 20 strokes or so. But Cambridge always kept in touch, and that was crucial for the light blue crew once the river began to follow that Surrey station around the bend after Hammersmith Bridge. And this was the controversial incident. Joe Gillette bringing the Oxford boat across into Cambridge water and the two boats coming together. There was an appeal, of course, at the end of the race from Joe Gillette, but it was not upheld by Richard Phelps, the umpire, and Cambridge, as you can see, pulling away to a comfortable 4 or so lengths victory. And at this point, as they approach the line at Chiswick Bridge, they know that the job has been done. They've defied the odds, underdogs coming into the race. But as we've just seen, the Cambridge women lifting aloft the famous silver trophy and spraying the English sparkling wine. And that was how their race was won. Now, though, it's time for the men to receive their prize. And the celebrations can start for Cambridge. Lee Mackenzie once again talking you through the presentation.
Welcome to the presentation of the 169th men's boat race. Presenting the men's trophy is the Vice-Chancellor of Cambridge University, Professor Deborah Prentice, and Marcus Backey-Howard, Head of Institutional at Gemini. We must say commiserations to the Oxford University Boat Club. And now, let's welcome onto the stage Cambridge University Boat Club. Please welcome up Noam Morley, Thomas Marsh, Gus John, Kenneth Copeland, Thomas Lynch, Luca Ferraro, Matt Edge, Ed Bracey, Seb Benzacree, and the coach, Rob Baker. You will get the chance to spray your English sparkling wine, courtesy of Chapeldown, in just a moment. But first, Seb, if you would like to lift the winning trophy.
Seb Benzacree lifting the trophy for the men's boat race for Cambridge, and joined on the stage by the reserve boat. In amongst all the celebrations, not sure I could spot Matt Edge, who had left everything out there, and the women now joining in for Cambridge. A clean sweep in the blue boats for Cambridge University. And what a party there's going to be in the Cambridge Boathouse this evening. So Cambridge with the celebrations. First, a women's race for the Cambridge with the ages. Cambridge with a 7th win in a row after a controversial battle on the Tideway. And for the men, Cambridge leaving absolutely everything on the water for a 5th win in 6 years. The tide in on the Thames and the sun sinking low in the sky. From the boat race for 2024, thanks for watching, and we'll see you back on the Thames next year.